Hey songwriters, I'm really excited because I tried something new this month and it worked out really well. A friend and I decided to challenge each other to each write a song that met certain criteria, and we had to finish it in a month. First of all, the song had to utilize but not be restricted to three specific chords. In this case, it was E, B minor, and G. Secondly, the lyrics had to include three specific words, and in this case it was barricade, fluid, and sore. We could use any variant of these words like fluidly or soreness, but the words had to be in our lyrics somewhere. I wasn't too worried about the chords or the lyrics. I know how to do chords and lyrics. The thing that made me nervous was that I had a deadline. I've never written songs on a deadline before. Up until now, I could always start a song, piddle with it, and if it gets a little frustrating, I could just set it aside and work on something else. And not having that luxury was a little intimidating. Since I barely had a month, it wasn't enough time to really explore and start and stop multiple projects until I landed on something that I really liked. I pretty much had to push through on one song and keep hammering away at it until it measured up. Finally, I recorded the version that I shared with my friend. Surprisingly, the deadline ended up not being an issue at all. I was done with plenty of time left over to come up with an arrangement and record the song within Logic. I really hesitated about sharing this song on this vlog. I'm not one to usually write politically charged songs, but I wrote these lyrics just after the Capitol riot, and well, that's what came out. So it's loosely inspired by all that's been going on in the US, but it's also, like a lot of my stuff, kind of full of fiction too. Anyway, I never want this vlog to be a platform for anyone's political views, including mine. So I wasn't going to share the song on here, but the song turned out so well that I think it'll just make more sense for you to hear the song, and then I'll explain how I wrote it. So I hope you'll forgive me, and I promise not to make this a regular thing. So here we go. I'll play the song in its entirety for you, and then we can dive into how it was created.
It was there from the first, like a harrowing tide, waiting up for the moon in the sickening sky. The malevolent chatter of the chosen few make a good God wonder what the hell he's gonna do. Till the war began to swell, and the boys began to yell. Slumber on angels, we've got the floor. Got a lingering suspicion we've been here before. There's a fight in the tower where the blood runs cold, on the steps where the patriots were stealing the gold. Till the war began to swell, and the boys began to yell. Tell me who will heal the hero now? With your fluids on the floor, yeah, you're bleeding out. The savior on the tree again, the passion on repeat again. Hand over hand on the top of the heap, where you plant your flags, three bodies deep. The lies with sword behind your mouth trickle down to the ground where the boys went south. Strung out on the barricades, we found you. 24 bad ideas around you. You thought to be there till the moor began to swell and the boys began to yell. Get down and kiss the ground and cry. You're the last sad lover of the freaking side. Take a bow, take a shot, take whatever you've got. Don't think we're gonna think that you're something you're not. Till the moor began to swell and the boys began to yell. Tell me who will heal the hero now? With your fluids on the floor, yeah, you're bleeding out. The savior on the tree again. The passion on repeat again. Hand over hand to the top of the heap. Where you plant your flag, 3 bodies deep. The lies from the sword behind your mouth trickle down to the ground where the boys went south. Who will heal the hero now? With your fluids on the floor, yeah, you're bleeding out. The savior on the tree again. The passion on repeat again. Hand over hand to the top of the heap. Where you plant your flag, 3 bodies deep. The lines with the sword behind your mouth trickle down to the ground where the boys went south.
When my friend and I came up with this challenge and I first sat down to create, one of the first things I had to decide was what aspect of a song to start off with. Do I start off with lyrics? Do I start off with melody? Do I start off with the chords? Do I come up with a beat first? Do I come up with a theme first? And I decided to go with lyrics first because I find it easier to write a music to a lyric than I do to write lyrics to the music, if that makes sense. Also, since I had these 3 words already to work with, I figured I could use them as a launch point for my lyrics. And so I took a pad and a pencil, da-da-da-da-da, and I wrote my 3 words, barricade, fluid, and soar, across the top of the page. And then I began to build these 3 separate columns of words. The first words that went on the list were variations on these words. So for example, for the word soar, I put down sorely and soreness, and you know, so on and so forth. From there, I started writing down rhyming words. I started off with end rhymes, but soon I started including alliterative words as well. And this is where the word may not rhyme, but it begins with the same sound as the word it's going with. I also included some inner rhymes and some imperfect rhymes. Now, end rhymes are the more common sort, but these other kinds of rhymes can really intrigue the listener in less obvious ways. So when I was done, I had about 1.5 pages of words that were connected in some sort to each other. Now, you might be wondering, why would I go through all this? Why write down these rhymes, and why try to come up with them off the top of my head? I mean, after all, that's what rhyming dictionaries are for, right? That's an excellent point. And honestly, I do use my rhyming dictionary quite a bit, and I've also recently found a wonderful website called RhymeZone. These are fantastic tools. Another essential tool is my thesauruses and a book of idioms, essential tools. But the brain, it's a funny thing, and it plays by mysterious rules. I can be looking at a huge list of words on a page of a rhyming dictionary and not come up with a single word that sounds right. Now, I'm suspicious about that. Shouldn't there be at least one word, somewhere in there that I could use? So why am I coming up empty-handed? Well, I believe it's because it's just too easy for my brain to just skim over these words. So nothing registers, nothing stands out. The perfect word may be in there, but it's blending in with all these other words. So to counter this, if I sit and put energy into thinking, coming up with my own list, my brain is forced to interact intimately with every single word. And then physically writing the word on a sheet of paper just makes the connections to my brain that much stronger. This will be a list that my brain is much less likely to ignore or skim over. Okay, so now I had a set of lists. One list for each of the required words. What next? Again, I had to use those 3 actual words, not just words that rhymed with them. And so I started playing with the words, just sort of tossing them around, and seeing what associations would emerge. I spent a little bit of time in my book of idioms, and well, of course, nothing came up for barricades, but there were a couple of idioms for the word sore, like a sight for sore eyes and sticks out like a sore thumb. And so I wrote these things down in my notebook and I moved on. I think the first actual idea that came to me came from imagining barricades as barbed wire. I pictured someone, tangled up in the barbed wire. And then the line came together, strung out on the barricades you found me. What does that even mean? I don't know. It certainly conjured up an image for me, though. I rolled it around in my mouth, strung up in the barricades you found me, and it kind of had a rhythm to it that felt good, especially when I spoke it out loud. And I found that I liked it. Strung out on the barricades you found me. And so from there, I jumped into my DAW, which is Logic Pro, and I brought up a simple drum machine and I threw together a very simple beat that seemed like it matched this line. Then I just started plugging away. Barbed wire made me think of warfare, and so for a while I was, working with a military theme, and I didn't hate that, but then I didn't limit myself to it either. I twisted it into a metaphor for dark love, and then I went with that for a while. And eventually I headed in a direction that was, very influenced by recent political events. And so it was there that I found something that began to really, really, really come together in the lyrics. Now, understand that through all of this, I was writing every idea down. I wasn't just, imagining them in my head and tossing them around and storing them and only writing down the good ones. I wrote down the good ones and the bad ones. Some of these were incomplete lines. Some of them didn't even rhyme. Some came in pairs. Sometimes even whole verses were coming, but I just put it all down in my notebook or in Google Docs once I started working in Google Docs. I accepted the fact that I knew that a lot of the stuff was going to be thrown away. And so it was okay if things were messy and disconnected, didn't rhyme, didn't fit. It was okay. I wrote it all down. I wasn't too worried about writing crappy lines. In my way of thinking, that if I write, 24 crappy lines, there's bound to be some gems in there, some brilliant things, even if it's just pieces of brilliant things that I can put together and make whole brilliant things, And I think this is a lot better than just sketching out 2 verses and just hammering away and tweaking at those 2, chunks of texts, trying to get them to work. I think it just makes sense to write a whole bunch of stuff and then pull out the stuff that is already brilliant and start stitching that together. It just makes sense to me. Needless to say, I was all over the place here. It was like a big garbled pile of goo on a page. But when I began reading over all this gunk, I began to see some really cool places, some places where some really special things were happening. Now, by this time, I'm working in a Google Doc, not on paper anymore, although I'm, looking at the papers that I've written consulting, but now I'm typing in a Google Doc. And I began to cut and paste the lines that I knew were good, the gems, the brilliant stuff. I began to move it to the top, and I was pushing the junk stuff down towards the bottom of the page. So I was grouping a lot of these things into groups of 4 lines, kind of like a verse, or the first half of a verse. And after a while, I began to notice that there were cases where, like, the first 2 lines would be good, but the second 2 lines would be kind of sucky, or vice versa. So I began cutting those out. Keeping the 2 lines that were good, whether it's the first 2 lines or the bottom 2 lines, I would keep those, cut out the bad 2, push those down to the bottom, and sometimes I could stitch together 2 good lines from one chunk of words with 2 lines from another chunk of words, and things begin to really come together. And what I like about that is, then if you have 2 brilliant lines, 2 sucky lines, you take out the sucky lines, then you get 2 brilliant lines from something else, you put them together, then you have this brilliant chunk of text where it's like a verse, and everything in it is brilliant. And so I like that method. It really worked well, especially in this case. I really liked the way it turned out. Now, of course, every now and then I'd get stuck, come through this period where just nothing was happening. And when I'd get to that point, I would pull out my list again, look over here, and see if any of these words triggered anything for me. Was there some kind of something that would stand out, that would add some lyrical strength to what I was wrestling with on the page? And I'm going to be honest with you, in this case, the answer was no. In the end, I didn't use a lot of the words or material on my lists. And so, was it wasted time? I don't think it was wasted time at all. It got my brain in this mode where I was crunching up words. And I think that I carried that energy forward into the writing of the lyric, and it actually enhanced my ability to work with words. So I don't think it was wasted time at all coming up with my own lists. Once I had collected a lot of good words, a lot of good lines, I began going over them, looking for meaning. See, right now, I had no real story to my song. What was it about? I don't know, something kind of political, something kind of about leaders and bad leaders and good people and stuff like that, and bad people. Just kind of a mess, but it didn't have any cohesive meaning yet. And so I began to take these phrases that I'd written, turn them round and round in my head, and move them around, and read over them, multiple times, and ask myself some questions. What story is coming out here? Or what backstory is coming out here? Or what message or feeling was pushing the hardest to kind of ooze through these words? What was there behind these words that I could begin to latch on to? Was it the military theme? Was it the dark love theme? Or was it something else? What I ended up going with was the political theme, and it was definitely inspired by just having, seen the Capitol riots. I don't think I have ever in my life written a politically themed song. I kind of have always hated politics and reading about them, having anything to do with them. It's kind of changed some recently, but I just have not been in the habit of writing political songs. But when I was looking at these words on the page that were kind of not quite assembled yet, what was oozing through these words was this political feeling. And so that's what I began to pull it towards, because that's the way it wanted to go. Now that I had what the song was about, I began to tweak the words as to make them support this meaning. And some of the lines that went too far off into Neverland, I began pulling them in and turning them toward what the song was definitely going to be about now. And of course, every time one word changed, it would, affected the words around it. And so I had to do a lot of tweaking here to get things to work together as I made changes. I mean, that's the craft of lyric writing, is working with those words, trying to get them to tie together. It was shaping up to be very lyrically dense, and I began to get the feel almost like a rap song. And I don't listen to rap or write rap. It's not where I feel comfortable as a songwriter or as a performer, but that's what was taking shape in front of me. So I went back to my DAW where I had made that real simple beat. And so I tested my lyric on this beat. I began to speak the lyric on top of this beat just to see how it flowed or where I needed to move the rhythm of some of these words around just to see if it would fit. Now, keep in mind, I've written no melody yet. There are no notes to these words. It's strictly the rhythm of the words. And I have to say, it was a challenge to speak these words to a beat. Like I said, it was lyrically dense. And so it was like, oh, this kind of a thing. But with some practice, it was doable. And more important, kind of sounded pretty good. Now, I am not a rapper. I've got no rapping in my bones at all. So I was definitely going to be pushing this towards a melody. Although I did play it once for my wife and she thought I should rap it. I'm like, not me. So, so later I did sketch out a rough melody and I began singing the song, even though I knew this wasn't going to be the exact melody. I began to sing some of these lines and I had to tweak some things and to make it singable, but it eventually came together. So now I want to point out some of the specific things that I did in the lyric. Besides the normal traditional ending rhymes, I also sprinkled in quite a bit of alliteration. There are places in the lyric that go, sickening sky, chatter of the chosen, good God, wonder what, who will heal the hero, etc. Often the alliterative words are separated by a few other words. So you had lines like steps where the patriots were stealing, steps, stealing, separated by other words. And then there were the inner rhymes. These are kind of my favorites in a lot of ways. This is where it's just the inside sound of the word that rhymes. It may just be a single vowel. It may be, what do you call it, a diphthong or something like that, but it's just the inside of the word that rhymes. So you have down to the ground, or down to the ground where the boys went south, or you have plant your flag, or no, they were only, things like this. Now I like inner rhymes because I think they can really catch the listener's ear without your song sounding too rhymey. A lot of novice songwriters don't know anything about inner rhyme, and so they just strictly do that end of the line rhyming, and that begins to sound just kind of not cheesy, but just rhymey. If you play with inner rhymes, you can make your song have that really feel of its rhyming, but it doesn't sound rhymey. Really a cool thing to play with. There's a poet, Wilfred Owen, that does this really well. I think Dylan Thomas does it really well. So if you read poems by these people, you begin to pick up on inner rhymes. Powerful, powerful tool. Now let's look at the rhythmic patterns. So at first, a lot of my lines were kind of sounded the same. And my early songwriting, there were distinctive patterns of my rhythm to my lyrics that definitely I repeated a lot. And so when I first started writing lyrics to this song, some of that stuff was coming out. But here's where using the notebook really helped, because I didn't just have one sitting where I sketched out my words. I wrote down words anytime something came to me throughout the day over a period of days. And as a result, I had a lot of variety of rhythmic patterns in there. And so when I began to pull everything together, I was drawing from these different rhythmic patterns, and I was able to make them fit together so that the rhythmic patterns in my song is not cookie cutter, like there's some variety in there. And so as a result, take for example the first line, it was there from the first like a harrowing tide, is very different from the rhythmic pattern of the first line of the second verse, where it says, slumber on angels, we've got the floor. They fit together, but they don't follow the same cookie cutter pattern. And then again, these are very different from the first line of the third verse, which is strung out on the barricade, we found you. And so again, they fit the beat, but each one of those has a different rhythmic pattern, and yet they come out feeling like they are the verses of the same song. This isn't always easy to pull off, and it doesn't always work for me, but in this case, it ended up working really well, and it keeps the song interesting. This is what I mean. I feel like this is one of the real keys to a song being interesting. And when I say I like songs that take me somewhere, this is kind of what I mean. The song travels. Rhythmically, it travels. It goes from one kind of rhythmic pattern. The next verse, it's a different rhythmic pattern. Third verse is kind of a different rhythmic pattern. And yet, it's the same path, the same road that they're on, but there's variety. So it takes you from here to here in more ways than one, and rhythmically is one of the ways it can do that. There were a couple of places where I took risks. There are a couple of lines in the song that are really scrunched together. The line that says, "Got a lingering suspicion we've been here before." Ugh. That is hard to sing without stumbling over the syllables. And I almost threw that line out. But I decided to keep it because I really like the weight of the meaning that it plays with. You know, got a lingering suspicion we've been here before. Another line that's really hard to sing, that's kind of awkward, is the one that says, "On the steps where the Patriots were stealing the gold." Really hard to sing at the tempo that I've got this song going. But it has such a strong visual connection to the event that inspired the song, I decided to keep it. There's a line in the song that goes, "The lies from the sore behind your mouth." And originally that line was something different. It went, "The lies that fly from the sore of your mouth." And I changed it to make it more singable. It's too soon after the writing of the song to tell if these decisions that I made to keep some of these lines or change some of these lines, it's too soon to tell if they were the right ones, but I'm really hoping that they prove to be good ones. So far, listening to the song myself, they seem like the right decisions, but you know how it is when you write a song at first, everything seems perfect. So. This song is kind of rare for me because I almost always write a bridge in my songs, but this one didn't really have a bridge, and it still doesn't exactly have a bridge. And I never set out to write a chorus to this song, but there were these lines in the song that seemed to ramble on together, and when I put them where they are now in the song, it kind of serves as a bridge. It just has that feel. The section that starts with the line, "Get down and kiss the ground and cry," or "Get down and kiss the ground goodbye." Can't remember how it goes. Anyway, that one starts to crank up the intensity a little bit and really builds into the chorus. And so I'm thinking of that as a kind of bridge. Now the chorus itself, "Who will heal the hero now?" I kind of Frankensteined that section together from the verses, and I changed the melody for that, and it ended up really working as a chorus. So I repeat it 2 or 3 times in the song. So that's my song, "Boys Went South," and that's how it came together. I hope you like the song, but even more, I hope that you gain something from seeing how the song was crafted. And of course, I just covered the lyrics here. In another video, I'm going to go into how I created other aspects of the song, mainly the melody. So I will see you guys in the other videos. Thanks for watching. Take care.